On the 25th of August, 1942, during the height of the Second World War, a flying boat destined for Reykjavik in Iceland crashed into the side of a hill in the Scottish Highlands. Among those who lost their lives was the VIP they were transporting. He was Prince George, Duke of Kent, brother of King George VI of the United Kingdom, and uncle to the current monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. During his lifetime, George became one of the best-known public figures of the age. Yet after his mysterious death, many details of his life were seemingly erased from history. Some believe that this was the result of a cover-up. But what were they trying to hide?
He became increasingly reckless. And this became quite dangerous, really. You know, we have to remember at that time, homosexuality was illegal.
There's a theory that people like Prince George were involved in a plot to oust Churchill.
It's more than a possibility, horrible though it is to contemplate, that the Kent's plane was actually sabotaged.
You're listening to Forbidden History, the podcast series that explores the past's darkest corners, sheds light on the lives of intriguing individuals, and uncovers the truth buried deep in history's most controversial legacies. I'm Janine Haroni, and this is Prince George, Tragedy or Treason. In this series, we delve deep into the history archives to unearth familiar stories, to reveal new perspectives. From Bible secrets with the real Mary Magdalene, to whether the death of Hitler's niece was suicide or murder. But in this episode, we examine the life of Prince George, Duke of Kent. Killed in a plane crash while serving his country in 1942, there are many who believe his mission was sabotaged. But why would anyone want the Duke of Kent dead? Could it be to do with the rumors of an illegitimate child? His relationships with men? Maybe even his drug addiction? Or was it to do with the theory he was plotting to overturn the British government by fraternizing with the enemy and negotiating peace with Adolf Hitler? Just what had Prince George been involved in? And did it play a part in his untimely death? Born in 1902 on the Sandringham estate, he was the fifth in line to the throne behind his father, King George V, and his three older brothers. His early life was typical for that of a young prince, and there was little to suggest that he would go on to become one of the most controversial royals in the history of the British monarchy. George was a highly intelligent boy with a gift for languages and music. He had a close relationship with his mother, Queen Mary, sharing her love of art and antique collecting. Upon coming of age, the young prince followed tradition, pursuing his father's passion, the Navy. Christopher Warwick is a royal biographer and historian.
There were telltale signs that all was not going well for George was when he went to the Senior Royal Naval College at Dartmouth. And that is when, either by accident or design, because he was unhappy or because he was just thoroughly bored with it, he went from the top of the academic ladder to the bottom.
As a sensitive and creative soul, George struggled with the strict Navy protocol. He also suffered terribly from seasickness. So it soon became clear to George, and the king, that a life at sea was not for him. However, playing to his strengths, Prince George carved out a role for himself, and he was the first member of the royal family to become a civil servant.
He was extremely good-looking, had a wonderful kind of personality, had a wonderful way about him that everybody remarked upon, and the public loved him.
Now a factory inspector, George was able to exercise his newfound freedom. And what better way to do that than reveling in the revelry of London's jazz scene in the 1920s. 20th century historian Dr. Caroline Potter explains.
He discovered the London party scene through his older brother Edward, who was very much a fixture on it during the 1920s. It opened up a new world to him. He discovered drinking and dancing. He could indulge his passions for music, and I think it really sort of opened his eyes to a completely new world.
George quickly became the quintessential playboy prince, enjoying jazz, cocktails, and gaining a reputation for his womanizing.
You could pretty much sleep around, provided it was with somebody that wasn't going to be damaging you or your career or your position, which is why showgirls and actresses were considered fair game. There was the actress Lois Sturt, people like Gloria Swanson and Tallulah Bankhead, famous silent movie stars, also crossed George's path at that time.
But for all his countless liaisons, there was one who stood out from the rest. Her name was Poppy Baring. To begin with, it seemed as though the king and queen had no objections. But as their romance blossomed, King George was quick to remind his son that no matter how far down the pecking order, royal princes married into royalty. Dr. Caroline Potter again.
She was a banking heiress, the daughter of Sir Godfrey Baring. George met her in the late 1920s, fell instantly in love with her, and there were even suggestions that they may possibly have married, but George V saw her as an unsuitable bride for his son and put an end to it.
George was devastated. He'd once again fallen victim to protocol. In an attempt to keep his wayward son occupied, the king decided to send George on his first official royal visit. He was to join his eldest brother Edward, the heir to the throne of the United Kingdom and the Empire, on a tour of South America to represent the crown. But the king quickly learned that his idea was mistaken. Historian and researcher Lynn Picknett.
It was basically two boys off the leash. They would go to nightclubs, they would lark about, they would get incredibly drunk. They were just basically enjoying themselves. They were two young men making the most of being away from the stuffy Windsor court.
His actions on the official tour had caused a major embarrassment to the royal family, but that was soon overshadowed by his next scandal. Rumors had started to circulate that George had become involved with one of the biggest stars of the stage and screen at the time, a flamboyant actor, playwright, and singer called Noel Coward. The Duke and Mr. Coward were introduced by a mutual friend after a theater performance, and they immediately struck up a public friendship. But within social circles, there were whispers that the pair were romantically involved.
I think it would have been a real scandal had it come to light that George was bisexual or had engaged in sexual affairs with other men, particularly Noel Coward.
The pair's antics were infamous. It was said that they would often raid the theater's costume department and take late-night walks through London disguised as women. On one occasion, however, Coward and Prince George found themselves in trouble with the law. Lynn Picknett.
They were arrested on suspicion of prostitution. And it goes without saying both of them got off very quickly, certainly as soon as Prince George's identity was ascertained. But he put himself in incredible danger, basically, doing such things. But in those days, he could get away with it because nobody in the press was ever going to report it.
Christopher Warwick again.
He became increasingly reckless